What if everything you've ever believed about religion, heaven and hell, creation and sin, God and the soul, was only a symbol, a veil covering a deeper, older truth? What if the stories you grew up hearing in temples, churches, synagogues and mosques were just fragments of something ancient, a knowledge once held by sages, hidden in temples carved into mountains, whispered in symbols only the wise could read? And what if someone actually uncovered that truth? Her name was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. In the late 19th century, she emerged not from the clergy or academia, but from the shadows of mystery itself, a woman in a time that feared women with power, who dared to claim that all religions came from the same source, that there was once, long ago, a universal wisdom, a truth behind the myth, and she had found it. People called her a fraud, a heretic, even a witch. But others saw something else, a fearless soul with access to something the world wasn't ready for. Because the moment you hear what Blavatsky actually taught, the moment you peek behind the curtain, something changes in you. You can't see religion the same way again. Not Christianity, not Hinduism, not Buddhism, not anything. In this video, you're going to follow the path she walked, a path that leads beyond dogma, beyond division, to a place where all religions converge. But I warn you, once you open this door, there's no going back. She was born into Russian nobility in 1831, a privileged life laid out before her. But Helena Blavatsky was no ordinary woman. From a young age, she rejected the path of comfort, wealth, and obedience. She was drawn instead to the strange, the sacred, the forbidden. By her early 20s, she had already disappeared from high society and vanished into the East. For years, she journeyed across Egypt, India, Tibet, and the Middle East, seeking out temples, ruins, mystics, and monks. Some said she rode on camelback into sacred lands where no European woman had ever stepped. Others whispered she had trained in secret monasteries, learning things that should never be taught. In 1875, she co-founded the Theosophical Society in New York, not as a religion, but as a revolution, a spiritual movement that claimed all religions were but faded echoes of an ancient universal wisdom. To the world, she appeared mad, chain-smoking, defiant, speaking in riddles, translating ancient Sanskrit texts by candlelight. But to her followers, she was a prophet, a bridge between the seen and the unseen, a woman with access to a truth that most had forgotten or never known existed. She didn't ask for worship, she demanded awakening. And what she revealed shook the very foundations of how we define faith, history, and even God. At the center of Blavatsky's teachings was a simple yet radical idea: all religions, at their root, come from the same divine source. She didn't believe that Christianity was superior, or that Buddhism held all the answers, or that Hinduism was the final word. Instead, she insisted that each of these traditions, along with countless others, carried pieces of a much older spiritual system, which she called the wisdom religion, or theosophia. According to Blavatsky, this wisdom wasn't invented by humans. It was revealed, passed down by enlightened beings, masters, sages, adepts, who once walked the earth in ancient times. Over centuries, their pure teachings became distorted, ritualized, and controlled by institutions. What was once open and cosmic became dogmatic and narrow. But she didn't stop there. In her monumental works, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky attempted something extraordinary: to gather the fragments of that lost wisdom from around the world and reconstruct the original truth. She quoted from the Vedas and the Bible, from Zoroastrian texts, Buddhist sutras, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Gnostic writings, and even pre-Columbian myth. To her, it was all connected, like a shattered mirror that, once put back together, revealed the true face of divinity. Blavatsky's message was as clear as it was dangerous: Your religion is not wrong, it's just incomplete. Blavatsky claimed that the original wisdom of humanity was preserved not in temples of gold, but in hidden sanctuaries, the mystery schools of antiquity. These ancient centers of knowledge existed in Egypt, India, Tibet, Chaldea, and Greece. They weren't open to the public. Their teachings were reserved for those who had passed the inner trials, initiates prepared to handle the power of truth without corrupting it. In these secret schools, spiritual science was taught alongside philosophy and cosmic law. The priests of Isis, the Brahmins of India, the Buddhist lamas of Tibet, and the Pythagoreans of Greece were all seen by Blavatsky as guardians of the same eternal flame. But over time, she said, that flame was buried under the ashes of empire, ego, and fear. Conquerors destroyed the temples, priests silenced the mystics, sacred knowledge became heresy. Blavatsky's mission was to reignite that ancient fire. She wasn't creating a new religion. She was trying to rebuild the original one, the one before names like Christian, Muslim, or Hindu even existed. A spiritual truth not based on belief, but on experience, not on obedience, but on direct inner knowledge. To her, the great religions were like different languages telling the same story, and she had come to translate. Perhaps the most controversial idea Helena Blavatsky ever put forward was this: God is not a person, God is a principle. She rejected the image of a bearded man in the sky, judging from a throne. That, she said, was a human invention, a symbol misunderstood as literal truth. Instead, she described the divine as an all-pervading universal consciousness, beyond personality, beyond gender, beyond form. A force that flows through everything, from stars and galaxies to atoms and thoughts. This divine principle, she argued, was recognized in different ways by different traditions. In Hinduism, as Brahman, the unchanging reality behind the illusion of the world. In Buddhism, as Sunyata, the infinite void that births all forms. In Kabbalah, as Ein Sof, the limitless source. And even in early Christianity, before the Church codified dogma, as the Logos, the divine intelligence underlying creation. Blavatsky insisted these were not separate ideas. They were the same truth, seen through different cultural lenses. She challenged the faithful to go beyond worship and step into understanding, to stop praying to an external being and begin awakening to the sacred power within themselves. To see God not as something up there, but as the very structure of reality, the heartbeat of the cosmos. To those raised in traditional religion, this was heresy. To seekers, it was liberation. Blavatsky believed that sacred texts were written in code, not to deceive, but to protect. She taught that scriptures have multiple layers of meaning. 1. Literal, the surface story, often symbolic. 2. Moral, the ethical teachings for the community. 3. Esoteric, the hidden spiritual truths reserved for those ready to awaken. Take the Garden of Eden, for example. To Blavatsky, it wasn't a historical event, but an allegory of consciousness, the descent of the human soul into material experience. The serpent wasn't evil, but a symbol of wisdom. The fall wasn't a punishment, but the beginning of individual spiritual evolution. She saw similar layers in Buddhist sutras, Hindu epics, and even the New Testament. To her, Jesus was not simply a figure of worship, but an initiated teacher, a master of esoteric knowledge, speaking in parables that only the awakened could truly grasp. Blavatsky encouraged people to look deeper, to question everything, to decode the symbols passed down for millennia. To her, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, and the Book of the Dead were not in conflict. They were all chapters of the same spiritual manuscript, scattered across cultures and time. She wrote not to attack religion, but to resurrect its heart, to strip away the fear, dogma, and control, and reveal the timeless light hidden beneath the surface. According to Blavatsky, the truth wasn't just hidden, it was lost, over and over again. Every time a great teacher came to illuminate the world, Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, Jesus, their message shone brightly for a moment, then slowly began to fade beneath the weight of misunderstanding, fear, and institutional control. She believed that truth moves in cycles, revealed, distorted, forgotten, then rediscovered. Religions, in her view, begin as sparks of divine knowledge. But over time, human ego takes over. Priesthoods rise, power structures form, and the living flame of wisdom is replaced by rigid dogma. The open sky becomes a stone ceiling. The sacred becomes secret, or worse, forbidden. Blavatsky's mission, as she saw it, was to ignite the spark again, to restore the original light before it was filtered through centuries of political agendas and mistranslation. She didn't call for people to abandon their faith, only to go deeper, to rediscover what came before temples and scriptures, to remember the living source that all great prophets drank from. Because in her eyes, the divine didn't belong to a single religion. It belonged to humanity. And the time had come for it to rise once more. Blavatsky claimed she wasn't working alone. Behind her teachings, she said, stood a group of advanced spiritual beings, the Mahatmas, also known as the Masters of Wisdom. These beings were said to dwell in remote parts of Tibet and the Himalayas, far from the noise of the modern world. Two of them, Master Morya and Master Kuthumi, were said to be her direct guides. According to Blavatsky, they were not gods or mythical entities, but highly evolved humans who had transcended ordinary consciousness. Guardians of the ancient knowledge, watchers of humanity's spiritual evolution. Skeptics called them imaginary. Critics said they were just figments of Blavatsky's mind. But her followers told stories of telepathic messages, letters that materialized out of thin air, and encounters with mysterious figures who knew far more than they should. Whether literal or symbolic, the Mahatmas represented something profound, the idea that we are not alone in our search for truth. Blavatsky taught that these masters had appeared throughout history as teachers, healers, prophets, quietly guiding humanity whenever the spiritual light dimmed. To her, the revival of ancient wisdom wasn't her invention. It was a divine assignment passed down through invisible hands, and she was just the latest messenger. Blavatsky had a unique gift, the ability to see through symbols. She didn't just interpret them. She decoded them, unveiling the hidden language of the soul that she believed was shared across all cultures. She showed how ancient symbols, the serpent, the lotus, the cross, the tree of life, the sun, the triangle, appeared again and again in distant parts of the world. How the Egyptian Ankh, the Indian Om, and the Christian halo weren't random creations, but expressions of the same underlying reality. According to Blavatsky, these symbols were not religious decorations. They were keys, visual tools meant to awaken deep memory within the human spirit, a kind of spiritual DNA, encoded in myth and ritual, pointing us back to the origin of all things. She argued that spiritual truths were never meant to be confined to one culture or language. That's why you see flood myths in Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica. That's why dying and rising gods appear in Egypt, Greece, and even early Christianity. These are not copies or coincidences. They are echoes. Blavatsky taught that when we trace these symbols to their root, we don't find different gods. We find one truth, endlessly expressed, forever remembered, and waiting to be seen again. When Helena Blavatsky began publishing her ideas, the reaction was swift and violent. Religious leaders condemned her. Scholars dismissed her as a charlatan. Newspapers ridiculed her as a lunatic. She was accused of everything from spiritual fraud to devil worship. In some circles, she was branded the most dangerous woman in the world. Why? Because she challenged the foundations. She exposed the inconsistencies in sacred texts. She called out the corruption in organized religion. She spoke of divine law without the need for a church. She empowered the individual to seek truth without middlemen. And perhaps most threatening of all, she was a woman. In the 1800s, a woman publicly speaking about divine mysteries, not as a follower but as a revealer, was unthinkable. Blavatsky didn't ask for permission, she demanded attention. She was loud, sarcastic, intense, unapologetically strange, and yet those who truly listened felt something behind her words, a depth, a resonance, a familiarity, as if she were voicing something they had always known but never dared to say out loud. She wasn't trying to build a new church. She was trying to burn down the illusions, and the world wasn't ready. More than a century after her death, Helena Blavatsky's influence is still rippling through the spiritual world. The Theosophical Society, which she co-founded in 1875, spread across continents, from America and India to Europe and South America, laying the groundwork for modern spiritual movements. But her impact goes far beyond the organization itself. She inspired generations of seekers, mystics, psychologists, philosophers, even artists. Carl Jung drew from her ideas on archetypes and the collective unconscious. Writers like Aldous Huxley, Joseph Campbell, and even Mahatma Gandhi engaged with her teachings. The rise of New Age spirituality, with its talk of chakras, past lives, reincarnation, astral planes, sacred geometry, all of it echoes Blavatsky's early work. Many of the concepts that feel normal in today's spiritual circles were once shocking, radical insights introduced by her. But her legacy is more than a list of doctrines. It's a spiritual attitude, a fierce commitment to truth, a willingness to question everything, and a belief that the divine is something we must each discover for ourselves. She didn't want followers. She wanted awakened beings. Whether you agree with her or not, one thing is certain. Blavatsky shook the world. And parts of it are still trembling. Let's ask the unthinkable. What if Blavatsky was right? What if behind every sacred temple, every holy book, every divine revelation, there is one golden thread, one original light, one eternal truth? What if Moses and Krishna and Jesus and Buddha weren't competitors, but messengers of the same voice, filtered through different languages and lands? What if the wars we fought over religion were based on shadows, while the light we all seek was the same all along? Blavatsky didn't offer easy answers. She didn't tell you what to believe. She asked you to dare, to look at the sacred differently, to step outside your tradition, not to abandon it, but to see it clearly, to understand that spirituality is not about sides, it's about sight. In her vision, humanity wasn't meant to be divided by belief, but united in awakening. She imagined a world where Christians could see the wisdom of the Vedas, where Buddhists could understand the mysticism of the Kabbalah, where seekers of all backgrounds could sit at the same fire, not to argue about whose God is right, but to remember where we all came from, a world where truth isn't owned, it's shared. Blavatsky often said that the greatest temple is not built of stone, it's built inside you. She taught that you don't need to cross oceans, enter monasteries, or memorize scriptures to find the divine. You only need to listen inwardly, to that quiet, persistent voice beneath all your fears and masks. The voice that whispers, "You've been here before. You've known this truth. Now remember it." She believed the soul is ancient, and each of us carries within us the whole history of humanity's spiritual evolution. That's why some symbols resonate so deeply. Why some truths feel familiar, even if you've never read them before. Because, as she wrote, there is no religion higher than truth. And truth, real truth, doesn't belong to one people, one scripture, or one prophet. It belongs to those brave enough to seek it, to see past illusion, to burn away the false and stand in the light of the real. Maybe that's why you're watching this now, not by chance, but because something deep within you is waking up. So what do we do with all this? We don't need to agree with everything Helena Blavatsky said. We don't need to abandon our paths, our faiths, our cultures, but maybe, just maybe, we need to look deeper. Because if even a fragment of what she revealed is true, then the barriers we've built between religions, between peoples, between souls, were never real to begin with. Maybe we've all been looking at the same mountain from different sides, and maybe now it's time to climb. If this video sparked something in you, a memory, a curiosity, a quiet realization, leave a comment saying, "I'm ready for the truth," and take a moment to reflect on this. If all religions came from one eternal wisdom, what would change in the way you see others and yourself?